Hi, everybody. Gabby here. For those of you who might have forgotten, because it's been forever since I've uploaded a YouTube video, I am a commentator and I also sometimes compete in the Pokemon Video Game Championships. So I thought today, given the new Gigantamax Pokemon announcements, it'd be fun to sort of do a little bit of a speculation video. I do want to say that I'm only going to be talking about the information that's been revealed on the Pokemon website. But if you're one of those people who like are staying away from trailers or you want a lot of the game to be surprised, just please be advised that while all this information is, in my opinion, sort of spoiler free, we will be talking about the stuff that was announced today. So that being said, let's just go ahead and jump into it because, I mean, oh my god. So, um, this is what, like, we got five new Gigantamax Pokemon today, and I believe that's like five out of eight confirmed so far, maybe nine. I'm blanking, but we can, like, look into that in a little bit. And I figured the first Pokemon to talk about should probably be Charizard, because like when you think about Charizard, I mean it's like obviously the one of the most popular Pokemon out there, and I think the design really does that justice. I mean, it's this like giant dragon. Okay, it's not a dragon. It's this giant flying lizard that just has fire like coming out from everywhere, and I don't know. I'm a fan. It almost looks like Charizard X and Charizard Y did like the Dragon Ball Fusion dance and this is what happened. Um but yeah, it's so cool. Okay. I know me talking about how cool Pokemon are like isn't really relevant to, competitive viability in VGC, but like come on, it's a giant fire, not a dragon lizard. Like that's pretty cool. Um, and one thing that I found really interesting about this announcement, well, okay, the first thing I just want to point out is like I really love how the Pokemon website tells you like the height of these new Pokemon, but not the weight. I don't know. I just find that really funny for whatever reason. Um, but I mean, the design is really cool, but with Gigantamax Pokemon, they do get their own special, ugh, they do get their own special Gmax move, which, as far as I can tell, takes the place of the normal Dynamax move or Max move that, normally would happen when a Pokemon goes into its Dynamax form. Um, Charizard's move is pretty interesting for me because it kind of reminds me of the effect that would happen when you would use Fire Pledge and Grass Pledge. It will basically cause residual damage to any Pokemon, um, which I'm not sure if this means any Pokemon that were targeted by this attack or any Pokemon on the field. I'm assuming it's going to be targeted based off the other uh, Gmax moves that were released today that made that very clear. So I guess that's a little bit different than how the old pledge moves worked. Anyway, any non-fire type Pokemon that gets hit by this Gmax move will be taking residual damage for 4 turns, which is pretty interesting. I mean, one of the things about competitive Pokemon that I think about a lot is um, I think that in the 2019 season, we've seen a lot of very fast play just because of all the primals that have been legal, all the restricted Pokemon that you don't normally get to see. And, here we have something that I think would be very aligned with more of a slow sort of, maybe even like a toxic stall kind of strategy for competitive. And I like that. I like that it gives you the option to do big damage while still setting up some of like the residual stuff because I don't know, like when I think about like entry hazards and when I think about sandstorm and stuff, like if you're wasting a turn to get it up, I don't know, it's hard for me to make that justification. So the fact that these moves like deal damage and then also deal more damage is pretty neat. And again, it's just like this giant like flaming inferno thing, which is pretty cool. Um, so the next Pokemon that was announced with the new Gigantamax form is Butterfree. I don't think I like this design as much as Charizard. personally, feel free to have your differing opinions on that, so to speak. It's very soft though, and I like that. I like how it has that little like almost cloud-like thing where the wings connect to its back. And it's just very soft and very nice and um also really terrifying. Just because yes, it's a Butterfree, but its new Gmax move, Befuddle, will again deal damage, but it will guaranteed paralyze, poison, or sleep your opponent's Pokemon. Which I mean, granted, you get a 1 of 3 of what status you want, and depending on what kind of strategy you're running on, I think paralysis and sleep are probably the ones that would interchange a little bit better because poison, yes, it does residual damage every turn, but as far as I can tell, this isn't like badly poisoned, so it's not going to be like toxic damage. Um, so I don't think it has as much utility in at least in assuming a 2v2 doubles format kind of thing for VGC, um, than paralysis or sleep does. Because sleep, you're literally saying to your opponent like, you can't attack for at least 1 turn. Have fun rolling those dice. And then for paralysis, you'll presumably cut the speed in by a third, um, or to a third of what it was. In addition to having that 30-ish% chance of getting fully paralyzed that turn. Again, I'm making a lot of assumptions based off the current battle mechanics. Huge disclaimer: Game Freak could just decide to change these things whenever they feel like it, which would be fun, but we can only really go on speculation in that regard right now. But that's like really cool. If you think about paralysis right now in VGC, and sleep too, I guess. There's moves like Spore and Nuzzle, and occasionally stuff like Thunderwave, Sunspore, and Sleep Powder will make an appearance, and maybe Dark Void, but we'll get back to that later. Um, but those moves, again, they take a dedicated slot, they don't deal damage, and at least in the 2019 metagame, it feels like you really have to make an attempt to sort of build your team around it. In my opinion, because Pokemon like Togedemaru, for example, which is really the Pokemon I think about when it comes to Nuzzle right now, just because Raichu and Alolan Raichu just haven't really been as popular recently. Um, you have to run it on a rain team, it feels like, because, steel electric typing, Primal Groudon is just not a Pokemon that you want to have a Togedemaru around for. So, you either, run it on a rain team and just sort of have that Kyogre have that rain, maybe even have the Rayogre option to protect it, or you just sort of resign yourself to saying, if I face a Groudon, which I mean, looking at recent usage statistics from regionals, so like Knoxville and Atlantic City, Groudon is still the reigning champion for primal Pokemon. So, you could be facing a situation where, 50% of your battles, your status Pokemon, your disruptor, maybe is the better word, can't be brought. And that's like not good either. So I like how Gmax moves, and I like how Gigantamaxing and Dynamaxing. I like how they're making it easier, I think, to sort of weave those strategies into play. Again, with Butterfree. This is the first time I'm recording one of these, and I know I'm gonna be too lazy to edit this out. So hi everybody. If you're seeing this, like, comment, and subscribe. Anyways, Butterfree and having this befuddle and having access to this sort of random status, I think is a really good sign. I don't think I'll be using this strategy personally. Beyond like this move and beyond stuff. Like, I'm trying to even think what you would use Butterfree for, and now I'm gonna pull it up because I just did not do this beforehand. Um, like, I know that in the past I've seen some people take advantage of Compound Eyes and, run those powder type moves with higher accuracy, but if you can use your Gmax move for that and your Gigantamax Pokemon for that, You don't really need that anymore. So then you're left with, yes, you could use something like Quiver Dance or Whirlwind, I guess, which, those are good options. But I'm not seeing moves like, um, okay, so you can Tailwind, you can Safeguard, so it would be an interesting support option. But I think my question that I have for Butterfree, and I have for some of the other Dynamax and Gigantamax stuff that's been announced, is, how feasible will it be to run a support oriented Gigantamax Pokemon? I know that you can, pick whatever Pokemon you want to Dynamax or Gigantamax during the flow of battle. So it's not like you have to prepare for this ahead of time, like you had to in the past with your Mega Pokemon, with your Z Crystals, with your what have yous. So like I like that flexibility, but one of the things I'm gonna try and explore, I think, early on once Sword and Shield come out is like, okay, um, you know, will I be able to use a Gigantamax Pokemon in a situation that might read more defensively? And if that works out, maybe I will run Butterfree. I don't know. But moving on, because I don't want this video to be like too long. We have Pikachu, which uh, he fat. I I was so happy. Like this was the one that like woke me up. I know it was at the beginning of the trailer, but I was just like, "Oh my god. He's back." But, Pikachu being fat has no impact on the competitive metagame, unfortunately. But what does have an impact is its Gmax Volt Crash. Now, I just realized that there is a screenshot for this, but I did prepare this video clip partially because I really like it when Pikachu Gigantamax and then you just hear it go pee, which it will right now. I really like that. But if you watch this video closely, once Pikachu goes for the Gmax Volt Crash, it will paralyze Mimikyu, which is expected. I mean, its disguise is busted. But it also paralyzes that Mudstale. And Mudstale is a ground type Pokemon. So this Gmax move can paralyze Pokemon that otherwise resist electric type moves. And it it doesn't take damage, but it gets the paralysis effect. And that is something that I find very strange, but also very cool. Because right now, when you're in a ground versus electric type Pokemon situation, maybe Togedemaru versus Groudon. I mean, that's what we were talking about earlier. Um, you can't really do anything to that Groudon. You can't damage it unless you have a non-electric type move. And if you waste a turn coming in on a switch or something, that's it. The turn's over, no damage, you're done. But if you were to catch a ground type Pokemon in on a switch with your Volt Crash, you could paralyze them. And I think that could really sort of change the flow of battle, which I think is awesome. Like, I understand that this Pikachu is, like, technically an event Pokemon, and you have to have Let's Go Pikachu in order to unlock it. So maybe this won't be something we'll be seeing in VGC necessarily, but I like that. I like this interaction, and I really am excited to see, if this mechanic or this idea that Gmax or Dynamax moves sort of override type resistances in certain situations, like with status. If that persists, and if that does, I think that'll be really cool. If it doesn't, I'm still gonna be using Fat Pikachu, so yeah, we got that one going for us, I guess. Also announced was Gigantamax Eevee, which I find it really funny that for Pikachu, they went back to the old form, and then for Eevee, they seemingly just like flipped its main thing upside down. I mean, it did get extra fluffy, and I love how the Dynamax clouds are like off to the side on one ear, but I'm sorry, Eevee. I think Pikachu wins this one. And I also think Pikachu wins in terms of its Gmax move. I mean, just to scroll down a little bit more, Gmax move Cuddle. It's like, okay, so you deal damage, and if the Pokemon on the other side of the field are of the opposite gender, they will become infatuated, which means they have, I think it's a 50% chance to not attack in any given turn, but Like the whole gender interaction part of this, unfortunately, really stinks. um, there are some, like, I remember some strategies in the past, in like past VGC formats, where attract was like considered viable, and then you would just run into this really weird sort of head game where you try and think, oh, I know this Pokemon is like 90% male. If I assume that my opponent doesn't care enough to, try and find a female, which is that much rarer, I'll catch them off guard and then I can attract. And then it just kind of like cycled in on itself a little bit, it felt like to me. um, so I'm wondering if this will actually have enough impact to make that happen. One thing I do want to call out is that if we have any gender locked Pokemon, which I don't think there have been any announced yet. Again, I forgot to check this going into this video. I'm sorry. That could certainly be interesting for Eevee as well, but I don't know. Personally, I just don't think infatuation is that big of a mechanic right now. I mean, it could be big, but I think that's going to come down to what Eevee and Pikachu look like in game. And again, I want to talk about that a little bit more later, because I do want to cover the last like Gigantamax Pokemon they announced. Because I mean, come on. They made Longcat a Pokemon, and the fact that I've been around on the internet long enough to immediately recognize Meowth as Longcat here, just, I don't know. It made me like both proud and then also kind of sad. But unfortunately, Gigantamax Meowth is, I just don't think he's going to be relevant. I mean, Gmax Gold Rush is really cool, and I'm sure that I'll be using it a lot in game to like mine coins, I guess, gather cash, collect currency. I don't know what else you want to call it. So that I can hopefully afford to make more curry and stuff, but yeah, I don't think that this is going to be too relevant. I guess you could also confuse your opponents, which, I mean, confusion's good, but I don't know. It's going to come down to how like the stats and stuff play out. But before I start talking about that, there is one thing I really want to point out, because ultimately where I'm trying to lead this discussion into is whether or not I think Gigantamax Pokemon are going to be allowed for the first sort of like Sword and Shield season of VGC. But something interesting to note here, and something interesting to note from the trailer. So I just want to like point out the Dreadnought here. Um, as you can see, this Dreadnought, it's Dynamaxed, but it's not Gigantamaxed. And just like as a point of comparison, you have the on four legs, Dynamax Dreadnought versus the on two legs Gigantamax Dreadnought. And I found it really interesting that they made a point in this trailer to sort of distinguish between that, because the demo for Sword and Shield has featured, Nessa and her Dreadnought, which was Dynamaxed, but at the time the demo was created, at least so I thought, Gigantamax hadn't been announced, so I thought, oh, maybe it just wasn't in the build or something. I mean, who knows what they're doing these days when it comes to, like, making Switch demos. But in the latest trailer, they still show it as a Dynamax Pokemon. So I'm wondering if, if it's going to be possible to either Dynamax or Gigantamax a Pokemon, depending on circumstances. And going to sort of like talk about those circumstances, if we go back to our friend Charizard, there's this flavor text right here saying, you can catch Gigantamax Pokemon for your team by participating in max raid battles. But it seems they're very rare. Finding one won't be easy. So I think, based off this information, that Gigantamaxing is going to be a additional attribute of a Pokemon, and you can only Gigantamax a Pokemon if you were able to get it in a state where, it had that unlocked. So either through max raid battles, the pre-order bonus, or having the save data file for Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee so far, are the ways announced. And if you go down to as well to just kind of look at the other announced Gigantamax Pokemon, Corviknight, Alcremie, and Dreadnought are really the only ones that we have that are, Galar Pokemon, new Pokemon. I think that's really interesting. I think that sort of leaves this opening for Gigantamaxing to potentially not be a mechanic included in VGC. I mean, it's certainly interesting that there is that distinguishing sort of factor to it. But at the same time, you kind of have to think about how Pokemon has been historically when it comes to these like event specific Pokemon or just sort of unique unlocked things. And I mean, I don't want to go on like a history lesson with you guys, but to go on a history lesson with you guys, um, so we have three of these Gigantamax Pokemon. Um, three out of one, two, three, four, five. Well, eight. So three out of eight Pokemon with Gigantamax enabled are confirmed to be sort of event only. You need to have a uh certain access to either the internet, Wonder Trait, or Mystery Gift, or save data from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee to unlock them. Um, but a majority of these Gigantamax Pokemon aren't that we know about so far. And if you think about sort of event Pokemon and how they've interacted with VGC in the past, if you can get it in game, usually it's okay. I mean, just going past the like last, I guess it's actually more than 10 years because I had found one data point from JAA, but last few years um for VGC banned Pokemon, Ash Greninja was banned because its ability Battle Bond is broken as anything. Um and you could only get it through the Sun and Moon demo. So you could only get it via an external game, even though that game is free on the eShop. If someone doesn't have internet access, or if for whatever reason, I don't know, they don't know what an eShop is, um, they can't get it. So that's like the important thing to call out. Prior to Ash Greninja being banned, an item Soldew was banned, and mind you, this item was allowed in Generation 7 games and above because it was not only was it easier to get at that point, but they also changed the item's effect, so it wasn't as broken. Um, that's kind of a trend here. But prior to Gen 7, Eon tickets were only available via e-reader events. You had to attend a Pokemon event in person, or you had to buy the special edition of Nintendo Power that had the Eon ticket in it, or you had to go through some weird event in Diamond Pearl Platinum, which again, it's not something you would know is there unless you specifically went looking for it, or if you just happen to like Pokemon, the month after the Eon ticket issue of Nintendo Power came out, you were just screwed. Like, that's it. No Soul Dew for you. Next. And then like the other stuff that has been banned. I mean, excluding Pokemon that evolve at weird levels or, stuff like that. Leftovers Wobbuffet was banned in 2006 because it just got the game into this broken state where leftover shadow tags stall forever. Everybody cries, nobody wins. And then, there was Dark Void as well, but they nerfed Dark Void, so that's two. um, but I think when we discuss whether or not Gigantamax Pokemon will be allowed in VGC 2020 or in any VGC format, really, I think we have to look at how potentially broken Pikachu, Eevee, and Meowth are going to be. Because I think the ones that are going to be available in game, I don't think those are going to be a problem. I think that if they were potentially that broken, they wouldn't be distributed via an external event, to be quite frank. Um, so we know that Gmax Volt Crash will paralyze, Pokemon that otherwise would not take damage from an electric type move, which is kind of broken. Infatuation, yeah, if you get lucky in terms of, whether or not it connects with your opponent, yeah, that's kind of broken. But the thing about Pikachu and Eevee, if you think about it, was with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee got a huge base stat boost. Like, huge. So if that's something that persists with these Gigantamax Pokemon, I don't think they will be allowed in VGC, because then you end up with an Ash Greninja situation where it's a cool mechanic and it's sure as heck fun to play with in game, but it's not really that fair competitively. Um, And then, poor Meowth. I mean, he might break your wallet in a good way for once, but I don't think he's just. I just don't see potential there. I mean, confusion, sure, confusion's great, but I don't see it, and I think that's okay. I I really like that. There is this sort of hard line between Gigantamax and Dynamax Pokemon, because I think that it sets us up long term to have a bit more of a fun format, something a little bit more varied, a little bit more interesting, and something that could theoretically rotate like Sun, Moon, and Ultra format did in 2009 or 2019. Oh my God, what year is it? And I think that would be really fun. One thing I noticed about this past year in VGC, and I don't have any data for this, it's all just, stuff I've noted in my head, is that people came back after the format rotation. Sometimes people would get their invite or just, max out on a certain event type in terms of their championship points or what have you, their BFLs, best finish limits. And then they just be like, okay, great, I'm on Pokemon vacation for like the next 6 months until I have to start prepping for Worlds. But people kept playing, and it wasn't just the Snowball people either. Um, so I think having that option to change things up, just sort of built into the game from the start, is going to be really good. That being said, VGC 2020, I would personally like to see Pokemon like Gigantamax Charizard, Gigantamax Corviknight, which seems amazing. I would love to see those in the format, but I don't think that it's the end of the world if they don't make it. I think that would just be confirmation that we'll be seeing it later on in the year. So, yeah, like I think it's a fun mechanic. I think it's a balanced mechanic. And I think that anything other than the potential base stats boosts of Pikachu, Eevee, and Meowth here, anything that makes it seem unbalanced is just because we don't have all the information yet, and that's okay too. I am a huge fan of how Pokemon's been handling the sort of news cycle for this release, for this game, and I cannot wait until the games come out on November 15th, which is like less than a month away. Yes. Yes, it's the 18th. So yeah, that's really all I wanted to say today. This was the first time I did a video like this. So I would love for your constructive criticism. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter or here or wherever. I stream on Twitch. I'll be streaming a lot of competitive stuff once Sword and Shield come out. And, if you like my content, I'd love to see you stop by. I'd love to, get some games going or something. And figure out how the heck this new format's gonna work, or even what the new format's gonna be. I if it's anything like past VGC game release cycles, so to speak, we probably won't know the rules until maybe a week or two in, unless the championship ladder is just ready to go from the get go. Which, I mean, I hope it is, but we'll see. So yeah. Anyways, I've rambled on long enough. If you've stuck around this long, thank you so much for watching. Yeah, and I will see you next time a Pokemon news video drops. So until then, see ya.